Welcome to episode 2 of the Dodgers Collective. My name is Doug McKain from Dodgers Nation. I'm joined by Fabian Ardaya of The Athletic and Sportsnet LA, former Dodger World Series champion Jerry Hairston Jr. here for episode 2. So also the comments, people saying the Avengers of Dodgers minds. That was a lot. I mean, I'm just happy to be here. But
so which one am I, though? Which one am I?
I'm going Hulk for you, man. I think
really. Wow.
Iron Man. I'm thinking Iron Man because I need the suit. I don't know. Who are you, Fabian?
I don't know. I'm not a huge Avengers guy personally, so I'll let that up for you guys.
I will say I just got back from the gym, and after that gym session, I do feel like the Hulk.
There you go. I love it. All right, guys. So, hey, let's get right into it. The talk, of course, yesterday, Shohei Ohtani on the mound for the first time this spring. Dave Roberts, after the game, said he was surprised how crisp, how good he looked early on. Fabian, you were there. What were your impressions of Shohei's first start this spring?
Yeah, he didn't look like a guy who was making his first start of the spring. I think that's the best way to put it. Is obviously this isn't the first time he's faced hitters. He threw a live session before going to WBC, threw a couple times against hitters while there. But the fact that he was there, we weren't able to really get a good look at it. We weren't able to have a good idea of where his buildup was at, where things kind of looked. But obviously, the fact that he was able to touch 99.9, the fact that the breaking stuff looked so good, that curveball looked on point. I think the only thing he had any frustration with at all was maybe the splitter wasn't doing what he wanted it to do in 2-strike counts. But if that's your biggest issue in your first spring outing, where you're able to get through 4 innings and touch the 5th the way that he did, it's everything the Dodgers could have wanted and more. And he looks ready to go for the start of the season, which he'll have one more outing in the Freeway Series before his regular season as pitcher starts.
And you asked me after the game about the importance of getting to 25 starts this season. I thought it was a pretty interesting response from him there.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things that as much as he's talked about wanting to be ready as a pitcher this season, he's really talked about wanting to be a Sai Young candidate, wanting to sort of be in the mix. And I think that's something he's definitely took head on as a challenge. And we've seen that in the past with Ohtani, where he sort of sets a goal for the future and really goes after it. But this is one that, in order for him to do that, he's going to have to basically go wire to wire, especially with how the Dodgers are going to be willing to skip a start here and there, willing to give him some extra rest here and there, just knowing that he's doing both. So he's going to have to really be ready to go from the jump, maximize the amount of starts he's had. He's only made more than 23 starts this season one time, and that was in 2022. And it's something that he sort of had an interesting answer on. He basically said, I think that's a benchmark. It's a benchmark for a lot of starting pitchers, and that's one of those things where he's not going to force it, but that's clearly something that he would like to accomplish, and I think is definitely feasible if you're sort of looking and projecting out health for him.
Yeah, I think you consider being in the WBC, getting some work done over there, but going 4 1/3 innings, 61 pitches, entering the 5th inning, had a couple walks, hit a batter. But Jerry, you had to be very impressed with that outing. What was your biggest takeaway?
How ready he is. Yeah, I was surprised that he went 61 pitches. I thought maybe in the ballpark of 40 to possibly 45. And yes, he did pitch in that simulated game against Samurai Japan when he was in the WBC. But all it tells me is that, and we all know this, Shohei Ohtani makes sure that he's ready. He makes sure that he has a strict regimen, not just during the season, but also in the offseason and prior to the regular season. So he made sure that his arm, his body was ready to pitch. We knew that, hitting wise, he was going to be ready. We saw it on full display in the WBC, but pitching wise, just making sure that his body, his arm was on point. And I'm not going to say I was surprised, but usually you could pitch, 45, 50 pitches. Sometimes the command is not there. The command was there. So he really was, I shouldn't say I'm surprised, but he was pretty much locked in. And yeah, he may not have that splitter the way he wants, but come on, man. I mean, you don't really have that feel for that pitch until arguably 3 or 4 or 5 starts in, just playing with guys that use that splitter. So Shohei Ohtani, just like Yamamoto, just like a lot of guys on this Dodger team, they don't like being surprised, man. They want to make sure that they're going to be extremely ready or as ready as possible in spring training and in the regular season. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have success all the time, but that's not going to be a reason why they don't have success. They're going to make sure they're going to be ready And for Shohei Ohtani to be that sharp in his first spring outing, it's not a surprise to me. And for him to go out and make 25 starts, I know that is the goal. I can't say he can't do it because we've all seen Shohei Ohtani, when you challenge him to do something, he exceeds that challenge.
Yeah, 28 starts in 2022, 166 innings pitched, finished fourth in the Cy Young voting. That's kind of the buzz right now, is can he get close to being in contention for this Cy Young? We know that that's definitely a big topic, but I want to ask you, Fabian, what that does to kind of impact the roster, knowing that he's as stretched out as he already is, throwing 99, feeling comfortable out there. Last season, we saw essentially building up in a big league game while he's also hitting one inning at a time. What does that do for the roster, knowing that you don't have to rely on as many bullpen games or swingmen or guys like that just to start the season if you can get him close to 5 or 6 innings early on the year?
I think it's one of those things where maybe that's a reason why we see someone like Kyle Hurt now on the roster, where you don't necessarily have to carry another multi-inning reliever along with a Ben Kasparius type, just because you don't have to worry about that for a long stretch of the season. And then early on in the season, I think it maybe opens the door for Justin Wrobleski to stay stretched out even more, like where he's not needed to be one of those multi-inning relievers. And maybe Wrobleski starts the season as a reliever. That's why I have him on our roster projection right now. But as a stretched out long reliever who, when that 12th game of the season starts, the first time they need a sixth starter, can sort of fit right into that spot.
Yeah, and I think that when you mention it that way, it's like a million things that Shohei does for this team on top of everything. And I heard Dave tell you guys on Sportsnet that, yeah, Shohei's always going to deliver. Like, breaking news, Shohei Ohtani does something great, right? But what I want to get you guys' thoughts on is this. He's not batting yesterday. And we know that maybe that's a nothing burger. Is it something that you think they could be tinkering with? Maybe a couple, like a little deeper into the season, when you look at guys that could be DHing, days when he pitches, you kind of see those splits there. I mean, do you guys think there's anything there? Do you think I might be looking a little too much into it?
That's a question I asked Dave Roberts yesterday. It was like, obviously, there was very clearly like a build-up maneuver yesterday, but like, is this something that where if he sort of comes to you, he's like, hey, I can start, but like, I need a day from my legs. Like, is this something you guys be open to doing? He didn't close the door. I don't think they'll do that often, if at all. But if like the fact that the door is not necessarily like the door is open on that, obviously gives you some interesting possibilities for down the line. Because obviously, you want Shohei Ohtani's bat in the lineup as much as possible. But if you are in a situation where he does need a day, obviously that does give you an opportunity to get Will Smith off his feet, get Freddie Freeman off his feet. It's an interesting thing to play with, but obviously, if you're in that spot, that means you're deep enough into the season with Ohtani at good health that a lot of things have gone right to that point.
I agree. I agree with that assessment. I mean, I think it's just a day, and that happens in August when he's had so many at bats. It's a hot day, and you say, we're going to get him off his feet, so to speak, in a lineup and make sure that he just focuses on pitching. I could see that if we're somewhere playing in August and it's going to be a 95-degree day and you do that, but it's not going to be a norm. He's used to doing this as far as pitching and hitting at the same time. So I don't see that happening more than twice throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a lot of opportunities with Muncy and Smith and Rushing and Teo, and there's opportunities for Freddie. Who knows? I mean, with Rushing playing first and catcher, there's a lot of opportunities there. But I know it's a small sample, but it wasn't necessarily the days that he was pitching. 18 games, hit 246, did slug 638. But it was the days after he pitched. 4 for 33, hit 121. The numbers were just a little down. The fatigue is certainly there. Fabian, from your days covering show with the Angels, kind of what do you make of just the post-start version of Shohei just as a hitter after that?
Well, remember the early version of him was he would have the day off before and afterwards. Yeah. And that was something that obviously was designed to keep him healthy. It clearly didn't. And Joe Madden, when he sort of came in 2021, basically said, hey, to heck with that. Like, we're just going to sort of throw the book and like let him sort of prove that he can't do this. And he's kind of gone that way ever since. I don't think they'll go back to where it was early in his Angels days also, because then you're cutting way too much into his at-bats and stuff like that. But it's one of those things that's going to ultimately come down to Shohei Ohtani communicating with the coaching staff, communicating with Mark Pryor, having open line of communication, knowing his body, trusting his body. And that's something that the Dodgers have seemed to do pretty well with him the last couple of years. And obviously it's a bigger test because it's his first full season doing both. So I think it's something that they'll have a feel for as the season goes on.
Yeah, the Angels the whole day before, day after, and we know what Shohei is after this season. After seeing that first start, Jerry, is it more clear to you that he has his eyes set on the Cy Young?
I'm not going to say yes, because we know Shohei Ohtani is always more concerned about the team. Yes, individual accolades, if it happens, great. But he said when he got and signed with the Dodgers, it's all about winning championships. Even at the parade last year, after winning a second championship, what did he say? 8 more to go? So that's always on his mind. Now, if he goes out there and pitches extremely well, and we're in July and August, and he's doing his thing on the mound, I think he's going to be hunting for that. But more importantly, I think the Dodgers, and like you mentioned Fabian earlier, he's got to be able to communicate and understand, I got to communicate with Mark Pryor. I got to communicate with Dave Roberts and the staff, letting them know how I feel. He's got to be extremely honest, because as great it is that he's being a two-way player, and for him to win a Cy Young and win an MVP, that is absolutely insane to do that. And again, I think he's going to shoot for it, but I think he's going to wait till sometime in July, August if he's in the running. But the most important thing is understanding we got to make sure he is healthy heading into the postseason. He understands that. And for him to be up for that is absolutely crazy. I know I'm smiling right now. And I said it on the last show, 30, 40 years ago, guys, when we had this conversation about a player, it is still mind-boggling to me that this guy has a legit chance, if he pitches the way he's capable of pitching, to possibly win the Cy Young if he gets 25, 28 starts, and obviously the MVP in the same year. So it's truly baffling to me.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a big wins and losses guy when it comes to evaluating pitchers. I mean, big shout out to Henry Chadwick for inventing that stat back in the day. But I still did go back and see how many wins did Babe Ruth have in home runs in a season. It was like 13 and 11. So I think just for Shohei's case, 20 wins, I think, means more, even if you're not using it as a big way to gauge and evaluate a pitcher. Just the mere fact that a guy can go out there and do that as often as he does and still perform at the plate, it's mind-blowing. I'm sure we're going to be talking about all season, right, Fabian?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something to he's never like strictly said this and put this out there, but I think there is something to maybe feeling like he left something on the table in Game 7 of the World Series, where he obviously comes in, pitches on short rest for first like real time in his big league career. He'd done it one other time, but it was a rain out, weird circumstances. But like for the first time really in his big league career, came in on short rest, exited after not the best outing. He clearly was gassed, like he clearly didn't have his best stuff, and exited with a deficit there, and didn't feel like he necessarily did quote unquote did his job on the mound. I do think, I wonder if there's like part of that that's sort of driving. It's like, hey, this stuff really matters for him on the mound as much, if not more, than it does for him at the plate. And having that sort of goal and that mission in mind to like sort of show how good he is as a pitcher, especially knowing how much that's sort of been up in the air for him, just considering the elbow surgeries throughout his career. It's something that he knows he's going to have only so many windows to sort of have a season like this where he's going to be able to possibly make 25 starts in a season.
And I love that point, Fabian, you just made about the goals thing. Athletes talk about it all the time. When you have a purpose and you have a goal to reach, that makes you hungry, and that actually makes you a better player. And we all know Shohei Ohtani, and it's been rumored years ago, he's kind of mapped out his career and what he wants to accomplish as not only a baseball player at the big league level, but he wants to accomplish team-wise, individual-wise. So there's nothing wrong with having that goal. Even Yamamoto talked about, I want to win Cy Youngs. And guess what? If he's winning Cy Youngs, or if Shohei Ohtani's winning Cy Youngs, guess what? We're winning a lot of ball games. So that's a good goal to have.
Yeah, and by the way, I hate that pitch to Bo Bichette in the World Series. It still haunts me, even though the Dodgers end up winning that game. I was breaking down some Shohei pitching with our guy, Jose Mota, and one thing he was telling me was just kind of going back to his Angels days. Like when he's in the rotation, he just wants to be in the rotation. He wants to make his turn through the rotation. He wants to be a 6-inning guy. And Bobby, you mentioned kind of the communication level that he's going to have with Dave Roberts and the organization. Just kind of how does that communication play on your minds? It's just, hey, we're just going to run this thing until we see a problem present itself? Or does it something that's a little more proactive than that?
I think it's something where they have to check in regularly with him. And I think especially Mark Pryor's got to check in regularly with him. I know that Dave Robertson, in a lot of ways, is kind of pretty hands-off on the pitching front when it comes to sort of managing certain guys. Ohtani is probably definitely one of those guys as well, unless it becomes a situation where it impacts him in the lineup. So I think it's something that they're going to have to check in over the course of the season. But it does, like you mentioned, he wants to make his regular turns. He even volunteers, I'll even pitch on shorter than my regular rest if they ask me to. I don't think the Dodgers will be asking him to do that, but they're going to be in a position where I think he knows, and he's kind of vocalized this is going to have to be a collaborative effort between him and the organization, knowing that there's going to be situations where they maybe ask him to take some extra rest between starts, and he said, if they ask, I will do it. So also we've seen situations where he has kind of volunteered himself on a whim, or it'd be a Friday in Baltimore. Tyler Glasnow can't go. He's on 8 days of rest. I can go, and he goes, and it was really good. So we've seen where they have to be flexible at times, especially last minute, where you wouldn't normally do that with the starting pitcher. But that's sort of an example of how much they kind of have to be ready on a whim if they need to be, but also being proactive on the front end of things.
Yeah, and it feels like they have a really good communication level partnership. And Shohei's always saying the right thing. I think my favorite quote from him last year was to the Japanese media when he said that he'd be willing to bat ninth if it meant helping this team. Don't worry, you batting ninth is not optimal for this lineup, Shohei. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about Shohei, so guess what? We're not going to talk about him again when it comes to will or won't he make the roster, right? We're going to go into Fabian Ardaya's opening day roster projection, which you're going to see on The Athletic, I think, in the next week, Fabian.
Yeah, we'll see that as it gets finalized, but a lot of it's sort of stuff that I've kind of written about, hinted about, just sort of the roster is close to set at this point, especially after the latest round of cuts, but just sort of how I view things kind of standing as of right now.
Awesome. So Shohei, of course, two-way designation. So that, of course, helps the Dodgers essentially carry an extra pitcher. So starting with the starting rotation, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, he's getting the ball on opening day, followed by Tyler Glasnow, Roki Sasaki, and Emmett Sheehan. That brings us to Roki Sasaki, who has really been the talk of spring training, just with the ups and downs. We know that the flashes are high. We also know there's some command issues that are part of it as well. Jerry, what is your latest on the latest start from Roki Sasaki?
A little bit of a mixed bag. Once again, I think it was better, but once again, the command's not there. The base on balls, you cannot have that from any pitcher, whether you're a reliever, but especially a starter, because when you have those free passes, not only you're having traffic on the bases, your pitch count continues to go up, and you're not utilizing your defense. So I don't know, looking at him, I don't know if it's his delivery. Is he trying too hard? He's always set in that stretch all the time. He doesn't have a windup. You look at our other pitchers, like a Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto, and other guys, they have a windup, an easy flow. And it seems to me they're using their entire body. Him starting at such a stop, I think, is kind of limiting himself a little bit. But needless to say, he's got to figure out a way to be more efficient. And because he's got two not good stuff, he has two greatest stuff. Because when we see him throw strikes, when we see him get ahead, he's mowing down these guys. He's got one of the nastiest forkballs I've ever seen, and he's got velocity when he's hitting the corners. So that's why I think I wouldn't say it's frustrating, because it is spring training, but it's a little bit of an enigma, because we know how dominant he was in the postseason last year. So we know he's not nervous. Okay, we know that's not it. We know he's not scared, but he's got to figure out his mechanics, because he is too talented, and we need him. Blake Snell's not going to start the season in the rotation. So we got to have guys that we can rely upon that can give us innings. And he can't continue to go out there and issue free passes, 3, 4, 5 base on balls, an outing, because that's going to limit his innings. He's just too talented. So again, it's spring training. I'm hoping he's trying to iron some things out. And then when the bell rings, when the season starts, he'll be fine-tuned, and he's be able to throw strike one, get ahead of guys, and use that devastating forkball.
Yeah, 71 pitches, 38 strikes, 4 walks for his spring 6 2/3 innings, 9 walks and 10 strikeouts. Fabian, I saw you told you guys after the game about how that two-seamer was impacting his mechanics a little bit there. What did you see from Roki?
Yeah, it's sort of like the trend line of the entire spring in a lot of ways, where he isn't able to make the adjustment in the middle of an outing, or at least not make it fast enough. Like where the point where the inning spirals fast enough that Dave Roberts kind of has to get him out of there. And by the time when he re-enters, he's usually better after that. But the fact that he's not able to diagnose and address in the middle of an outing, in the middle of an inning, it's easier said than done, obviously. And that's one of those things where a more veteran pitcher probably be able to do it a little bit quicker. But that's been one of the biggest things for him, because like you're right, when the command is dialed in for like those spurts, like it looks really good. And he looks like a guy who, as he's trying to figure out this third pitch, is at least a guy you trust to go through the order a couple times and look pretty good. And maybe if the third time through the order is an issue, that's an issue you can deal with. That's an issue that every young starting pitcher has to go through. But the thing that's concerning with him being in the rotation to start the season is, all right, what if he has one of these blow-up innings early on in a regular season game? What does it do to your bullpen going forward? All that sort of stuff. This is stuff that the Dodgers obviously can afford, especially in April and May. This was the spot they were in last year with him, and they got along just fine. They won the World Series, even with him not working out as a starting pitcher. But it's definitely something that is interesting to keep in mind, especially with the Dodgers insisting that he's going to be in the rotation to start the year. And it's very telling, obviously, to hear Dave Roberts say, when asked directly, all right, is he one of your 13 best pitchers? And he said he's going to be a starter. That was the non-answer that you sort of have.
Yeah.
Where it speaks to like what he's done. Like it speaks to what the results have been this spring. And obviously the Dodgers aren't going to rely solely on his spring training results, because if you're going strictly off spring training results, then you're looking at River Ryan being a shoe-in to be in the rotation because of how dominant he's like. But there are obviously other factors at play. They want to have River Ryan in a controllable environment because he's coming off Tommy John surgery, and they also feel that rookie Sasaki's best development is going to come in the big leagues, and they're willing to swallow whatever lumps come their way. And that's the decision that they're making. I think it's a luxury that the Dodgers are in, but it's something that you have to sort of monitor how this is going to impact his development going forward and how long release he's going to have going into the season.
Yeah, I remember when I heard Dave say that, I was like, really hope Rocky's not watching this or hears this, because of the confidence. And you just want him to be in a great spot mentally out there on the mound. As far as that third pitch and just the experimentation there, I mean, you talk to some guys and like, okay, he needs a bullet slider, a fastball that he can buckle some guys, but needs a kind of a wipeout, finish out in front of you type of slider to get the hitters off the forkball. Where do you guys think they are at as far as just the experimentation and knowing what the third and fourth pitches they want to go with are? Start with you, Jerry.
Well, I think he's going to need a third pitch. You know, everybody knows that, just to get him off the fastball, just to get him off the forkball. Case in point, if you're a hitter and you know that he is not having that command with that fastball, more than likely, we know already as a hitter, he uses that forkball to get as a chase pitch. Now I can hunt a fastball in the middle of the plate. If it's a little off to the right, a little off in, I'm going to let that go. I'm hunting middle of the plate because he hasn't proven to me he can hit his spots. And guess what? The umpire is not going to give him those spots either, because he hasn't proven to the umpire that he can hit his spots. So you're feeling extremely confident as a hitter. But if you have that third pitch and I'm hunting that fastball center cut and he throws a breaking ball, whether it's a pretty nasty slider on the black or in the middle of the plate down, I'm going to take that pitch. Now he's ahead in the count 0-1. That's how important that third pitch is, because I'm sitting hunting fastball in the back of my mind, that forkball's in play and he drops that breaking ball. Now I'm behind the count. Now I got three pitches to deal with because he's ahead in count 0-1. It's the ultimate chess game. And I say all the time, that's what makes baseball so special. And it's the best game in the world. I mean, it could flip a script, the battle between the pitcher and the hitter on one pitch. Now he's 0-1 as opposed to 1-0. Now he don't want to throw that forkball because guess what? Chances are I'm going to be sitting 2-0. So here comes the fastball, and that's what you've seen in spring training so far. These guys are jumping on the fastball. So that third pitch is vital for us, for any starter. You need to have three pitches to be able to have that count mouse game with the hitter.
And you don't need three pitches if you're a reliever. Do you think there's any peace of mind just knowing that, yes, the long-term plan, of course, is for him to be a starting pitcher? That is the goal. We know that. Former top prospect. He wants to be the best pitcher on the planet. But do you think there's any peace of mind knowing that at the very least his floor is we saw him have some success as a reliever, and you kind of lean on that just a little bit, Fabian?
I think that's not a problem for August, honestly. If you're in that spot like where you're considering using him as a reliever, either it's really gone poorly for him as a starter, or you really got healthy in the rotation, or some combination of both. And even then, like there are still some things that have been problematic about his spring that would be problematic as a reliever. Like if he can't command the fastball, can't be in the zone, that's a non-starter. And that's where he's kind of been at certain points where like he's either looked dominant for stretches because he's able to have that one main keystone, or he just has the inning collapse on him. So that's still one of those things that if you're the Dodgers, you still just need to get that fastball command locked in. That's like the first, second, and third most important points for him to be an effective pitcher, let alone starter.
Yeah, Sandy Koufax said the best pitch in baseball is still a well-located fastball. My hope is that, if you guys remember a couple years ago, Andrew Heaney, before the season started, it just all of a sudden clicked with that sweeper. You just never know when a certain pitch can just kind of click in and they find it and they just take off from there. Jerry, that kind of has to be the hope for Rokia. And as Fabian points out, the fastball command.
That definitely has to be hope. I will say this. There are players that I played with in the past, both pitchers and hitters, that they just kind of struggled in spring training. They needed the bright lights. They needed the stadium feel, and they needed that energy. They needed adrenaline. I play with a guy, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. I play with a guy named Harold Baines. He never had good spring trainings. That historically, he just didn't. Then he gets to the big stage, the big leagues, and he absolutely rakes because he loves the energy and he loves big league stages. I'm hoping that is the case with Roki Sasaki because we know how he performed on the big stage in the playoffs. I'm hoping when the bell does ring, he's able to have that fastball command and he's able to spot that fastball, and now he can use his secondary pitches. So we know Roki Sasaki is not afraid. He loves that type of drama, and I'm hoping that is the case. Spring training just not his thing. And guys, I play with some guys like that, and hopefully once the bell rings, he goes out there and does his thing.
Yeah, sometimes you got the in-game shooters, right? And Roki kind of was that last year in the postseason for the Dodgers. So as far as the rotation goes, you got Shohei with a two-way designation, but Yamamoto, Glasnow, Shohei, Roki, and Emmett Sheehan. I feel like Emmett Sheehan doesn't get talked about enough. But I think one of the storylines heading into the season is which and how many of these young pitchers are going to contribute and give them big innings and big starts. Fabian, I feel like Emmett Sheehan, he's made it very clear. This is my first season as a full-time starter from wire to wire.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things the Dodgers definitely have to monitor, especially when you're looking at his spring. He's been fighting through it delivery-wise a little bit. Like the velocity is down a little bit from where it was last year, so that's something to monitor. I don't know if it's a reason for concern just yet, but like that's a guy you have to keep in mind because he's coming off essentially 2 years of rehab, going straight through the postseason, having a short off season, and all of a sudden now he's gonna have his first full season. So he's a guy that you're gonna have to keep a close eye on. River Ryan, he looked dominant this spring, but like this is also a guy who like there's gonna be some hurdles as he's coming off Tommy John surgery, just getting those last little things ironed out. Like that's a guy who still doesn't even have 200 career professional innings. So like there's also something to that where like he's obviously looked really good at every single level he's hit, but there's also something to there's going to be a learning curve at some point for a guy like that, even a guy as talented as River Ryan. So he's a guy. We'll see how Gavin Stone looks. He's supposed to start picking up baseball sometime next week, and once that happens, like then he can start the ramp up period again. But like that's a guy who looked really good early in camp, looked really good in 2024 before he got hurt. So those are guys that they're probably the three young guys they're relying on the most to sort of bridge some of those innings along with the Justin Wrobleski, who can sort of go between with the rotation and bullpen.
Yeah, and it feels like ceiling-wise, River Ryan comfortably throwing 98, 99, 100. I asked him about his diet. He said, no, I worked out, was a beast. I was an animal in the offseason. Feels like ceiling-wise, Jerry, River Ryan has got a lot of potential.
He's got a lot of potential. When I first saw him, before he got hurt a couple of years ago, I started to shake a little bit because I faced a guy named Tim Hudson back in the day who kind of gave me some fits, and he reminds me a lot of Tim Hudson. With that running fastball, that sinking fastball, to touch 95 to 98 miles an hour consistently, and he's got that bulldog approach. And I know Huddy was a position player at Auburn, and then obviously became an incredible pitcher at the big league level. So he's got that mentality. Yes, he's got elite stuff. But like Fabian mentioned, he's pitched less than 200 innings professionally. So again, you got to be very careful with him. He's just coming off of Tommy John surgery. I don't see, and again, they can still put him on the roster. That is a strong possibility. But they may elect to say, you know what, let's get him some starts. Get him going in AAA, get him used to that, and because we're probably going to need him. The good thing about the Dodgers, and these young players understand this in the organization, you're going to get your chance. You're going to get an opportunity. So if I'm River Ryan, if I'm the young guys that are in AA and AAA, I make sure I'm ready because they want to make sure that their arms are healthy. They're going to skip guys every once in a while, and you're going to have that opportunity to shine. And we mentioned Robleski as well. I really believe he's going to have a big year. I think that postseason and World Series performances he's put on, I think that gave him some confidence. He knows he can go out there and get outs, whether he's a starter, whether he's a guy that we need to eat up innings, or come in and shut the door in the 6th, 7th, or 8th inning. So this guy loves that challenge, loves having the ball in big moments. So whatever they ask of Robo, he's going to be willing to do. And I still see him as a starter down the road, but I think he's going to be kind of a super utility pitcher for the Dodgers this year.
Yeah, you got to love the flexibility with Robo. He's been in 32 games his big league career, 8 starts. Before we go to the bullpen, they want to get you guys' thoughts on this. So saw Clayton Kershaw at the WBC final, did a super quick interview with him. I asked him, is this the last time you're ever going to be wearing a baseball uniform? And he said, yes, unless something really weird happens. And then after, I was saying, hey, man, these young pitchers, they would kill for 22 starts and a 3.36 ERA. If they get injured, you pick up the phone. He just kind of gave me a look. Any thought on the possibility of maybe a Roger Clemens? I'm just like, he left the door so. I don't even want to see him pitch again because I love how his career ended in a World Series note, but just a little crack there. I mean, right?
I think it's done. I do. I think he kind of knew that in the moment. He kind of knew that even going into the WBC, and he didn't even get into obviously one of those games. He only got into one of the exhibitions, but yeah, I think that's it for Clayton. I do think that he'll be at the ballpark for ring night. He'll be around a little bit this season, but yeah, I do think there's something to wrapping up the way that things did for him as a Dodger.
It's a package deal. I don't think you caught what he said after Dougie Fresh. He goes, if I come back, Jay Harris come back with me. So it's a package deal. So that said, I can confidently say Kersh is done, man. Listen, just talking to him before he announced his retirement, I knew probably 3 months before, because I would go down to the clubhouse and be in Alex's office. He's the head clubhouse guy for the Dodgers. Alex Torres does a tremendous job. One of the greatest guys in the game. And I'd sit in there in his office and all guys, whether it's Kike, Freddie, Mookie, all those guys. If they want something to say, have something on their mind, if they want me to make a comment on the post game, I'm just there just to kind of hear these guys bounce some stuff. Well, Kersh would come by a lot and we just start talking. And I've never heard him speak the way he spoke last year. And I didn't say it. I go, he's going to retire. I told John Hartung, I come back, I think it was in May or early June. I go, this is last year. He goes, what are you talking about? It's his last year. Trust me. He has never talked like that. Talking about taking it all in. I really value this team, this organization. I'm so glad my family's here to see this. I go, he's done. That's how I was speaking. Obviously, Clayton Kershaw's a Hall of Famer. I'm not a Hall of Famer, but I knew my last year, I knew I was done. Even though when I was injured, I go, I'm just going to play through it because I know this is my last year. So Clayton Kershaw is done. He's had a historic career. He's the first ballot Hall of Famer. And for him to close out on top as a World Series champion, back-to-back World Series champion, I think that is the perfect ending. And I don't think he wants to mess that up, man. He'll come back, I'm sure, during the season because his kids want to come play at Dodger Stadium, visit, talk with the guys. Obviously, he's going to be there at ring night. And I love the fact he's getting in the TV game. I love that. And it's great for baseball, great for Kersh. And I'm excited for his next venture, the TV game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we'll see you in Cooperstown in 2031, right, Kersh? So switching gears to the bullpen, Fabian's got 9, Edwin Diaz, Tanner Scott, Alex Vesia, Jack Dreyer, Ben Kasparius, Will Klein, Blake Treinen, Edgardo Henriquez, and Justin Robleski. I want to start with Blake Treinen. He's had his own share of ups and downs to start spring training. He's had some volatility throughout his career. Last season had a really rough September. It looked like he was getting things together early in the postseason, and it really went to low leverage towards the end of the postseason. Just what do you see from Blake Treinen? It feels like he had a positive appearance, Before that, gave the grand slam. He's a veteran, so you can't take too much away from his spring training, but they're going to have to use the first part of the season to really evaluate what they have in him, Fabian.
Yeah, 100%. I think got to the point where before his last outing was good, but before that, coming off the previous outing, Dave Robertson kind of said, like, he doesn't look like a guy who has a lot of confidence right now, which is along the same lines of what the team was saying about him by the end of last October. And obviously the Dodgers have a ton of trust in him. It was to the point where, like, his roster spot has been in jeopardy. It hasn't been. But it clearly is going to paint the picture of how you're kind of viewing him to start this season, like how quickly they're going to throw him into a leverage spot, how much they really trust him early on in those sort of spots, especially when he hasn't gone right for him. It's been because of the command, like the fastball, the sinker hasn't been able to be located. The sliders are non-competitive. And when he doesn't have one of those pitches going, especially when he doesn't have two of those pitches going, then all of a sudden things are in a lot more difficult place for him. So he's a guy who's going to be in the bullpen to start the season, but I'd imagine that they're going to try to ease him in if possible.
And you talk about kind of the veterans and needing to play under the lights, Jerry. For someone like Blake Treinen at this stage of his career, he's had the highest highs. He's had some lows during some season. I mean, what do you think the mindset is for him heading into the season?
I think you can't take a whole lot of stock in spring training, especially a guy like Blake Treinen. Now, that being said, he understands this too. He's getting a little older. So the questions are going to be there. Is he kind of creeping towards the end of his career? So he's got to make sure that when he does start this season, he has that fastball command. He has that breaking ball. And that's the one thing is you can have an elite breaking ball, but if it's non-competitive, meaning it's a ball out of hand, hitters can eliminate it right away. What makes him so effective, he'll drop that hammer, that slider for a strike because it looks like a fastball hitter coming right at you, especially the right-handed batter. And then he gets you to chase it with 2 strikes. That's the key, having that type of command on that breaking ball. Now it seems to me he doesn't have a feel for that. Hopefully he finds that feel and he finds that command because we know how lethal it is. Another guy we talk about all the time, it's the big stage. He loves pitching the big stage. He ain't afraid. He's certainly not afraid, but he's got to have feel for both those pitches, that running fastball and that breaking ball. So I'm hoping he finds it. We all love Blake Treinen. We know he's one of the best teammates out there. But again, we need him to be at his best. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to go out there and have 75 appearances throughout the season. I don't think that's the case. But we got to make sure that we kind of monitor his innings, his appearances throughout the season, and make sure we get peak performance from Blake.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, just the durability concerns. He was dealing with the forearm tightness, and you look at a Dodgers season, 6 months, and plus how pivotal he was in the 2024 postseason. He's on this roster. He's here to help this team in October. How do you think they kind of manage him, Fabian, at the start of the season, the middle, and kind of towards the end of the year?
I think they're going to ease him in terms of like the type of situations he's in, but I mean, if you're in the pen, like you're going to be used. And I think they kind of know that, especially with certain guys, like especially some of these veteran guys. I think they're kind of baking in that there's going to be periods where guys are going to have to miss some time. I think that's why they've backfilled their infield so much because they know that a guy like Max Muncy, as good as he's been, he's missed some time the last couple of years. A guy like Emil Rojas has had some injuries they've picked up here and there. Freddie Freeman's been playing through the ankle the last couple of years. So like, these are all things that like they kind of know. On the position player front, I think the bullpen's sort of no different, knowing that you're kind of hoping for the best for health and sort of quality for those guys. But we've seen the Dodgers do this with veteran relievers. Like they had a stretch in 2024 where they never put Daniel Hudson on the IL, but they basically stayed away from him for a week and a half, kind of reset him in August and September. And there might be a situation where they have to do that with some of these veteran arms. And that's another thing where they kind of have the luxury of, if things go as planned and they have the lead that they expect to in the division by that time, that sort of gives you more freedom to kind of shut some guys down in the middle of the season and keep making sure that they're at peak performance come October.
Yeah, and he's really been a pitcher, relies on the sweeper and the sinker. Last year, that sinker got teed off on 449 slug, and the Abbott numbers extremely high, 382 in the regular season, 476 in the postseason. When you kind of look under the hood at some of his stuff, it's really interesting because he had a career-high strikeout rate, but a career-high walk rate to start the year. Do you sense any adjustments, or is it just kind of getting him back to getting the feel for his stuff when it works his best? I mean, at this stage of his career, he kind of is what he is, right, Jerry?
Yeah, it is what it is with him. Listen, he knows what he needs to do. The thing is, he's got to be able to do it. So he's got to figure out a way to to command that fastball, command that running fastball, that sinker, and that breaking ball. So once again, like Fabian mentioned, they made sure they kind of gave Daniel Hudson a few years back that reset time. Well, this is an opportunity before the season. Hopefully we reset and have that reset for him to make sure that he's ready to go start the season. If he gets off to maybe a slow start, maybe early on, they give him that reset. But again, we know when Blake Treinen is on, he is nasty. He's not 45 years old, okay? But he does have a lot of mileages on that arm and that shoulder. So hopefully he can find and command both those pitches, because seeing Blake Treinen, that nasty slider, when it's on, is one of the best sliders that we've ever seen in this game.
Yeah, and I think you look at the rest of these names, Edgardo Henriquez is one that your takeaway is, hey, overpowering stuff as far as velocity, but not as far as strikeout rate. 23.4% strikeout rate, but still a 2.37 ERA. There were some ups for him. Then in the postseason, they kind of lost trust in him. It's going to be a big year for Edgardo Henriquez and trying to gain the trust of Dave Robertson, this bullpen, to use him not necessarily in the top leverage spots, but the potential, the ceiling for him is so incredibly high. Right, Fabian?
Yeah, he hasn't had the best camp, and I think that's something that's kind of frustrated some Dodgers people. Just the fact that like the command hasn't been consistent, and they haven't been able to find something mechanically that's been consistent with him. Because there's been the flashes, the stuff is great. I think the big thing for him being on the reason why I put him on the roster this time around is obviously with optioning out Cal Hurt. Cal Hurt's a guy who probably has pitched better than Edgardo this spring, and probably fits if you're trying to put together an October bullpen before Edgardo Henriquez does. But like Cal Hurt's coming off surgery, they want to give him some reps, know that they can sort of know when to push him back to back. Don't feel like they have to push him back to back. Edgardo Henriquez is more ready to do that stuff right now, and he's an optionable reliever. He's kind of occupying that spot in the pen that's going to be very up and down. A lot of different names are going to be occupying that kind of role over the course of the season. And I think Edgardo is just a guy where it's convenient timing for him, and he's got the stuff. So maybe if he can catch fire and get on a roll, then he can sort of get out of that role. But as of right now, that's kind of where he's at.
And as far as other big storylines, as far as the bullpen goes, Tanner Scott. It's going to be all eyes on Tanner Scott. Will he be more comfortable not being that primary closer? He's talked about how he worked too much in the zone last season. He's got to trust the fastball slider. What have you seen early from him this camp, Jerry?
Well, the stuff really has always been there. Even last year, the stuff was there. And he made a point, listen, I got to stay away from the middle of the plate. Once again, guys, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're prime Sandy Koufax, if you're prime Don Drysdale, prime Clayton Kershaw, if you're sitting in the middle of the plate, guess what? Big league hitters are going to square you up. And Sandy Koufax mentioned it, and Fabian, you just brought it up. The best pitch in baseball is a well-located fastball. That's true. Tanner Scott would get 0-2, 1-2 on a lot of hitters last year. And what would he do? Leave a fastball center cut, 2 strikes, or hang a slider center cut, and guys will barrel it. So he's got to be able to finish guys off. He was getting ahead of a lot of hitters last year. It was that third pitch with 2 strikes. He would leave it in the middle of the plate. So I think he went back and saw video of his season. He said, man, I'm getting ahead of guys. I'm just not putting these guys away. So I got to make better pitches with 2 strikes, because he certainly has the stuff. And when he did do that last year, he got outs. So hopefully this year he understands, takes a step back. Maybe the weight of the world is not on him, like being the guy, being the closer. Obviously, we have Diaz now as a closer. Now he can settle into a role that he's used to being, that 8th inning setup guy, and go out there and command the strike zone and command his pitches. When he does that, guys, historically, he has been as good a left-handed reliever as there's been in baseball the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, he was absolutely elite for the last couple of years before he signed with the Dodgers. Fabian, when you look at the mix, I mean, it's fastball, it's slider. You got the arm side run, you got the rise, you got the slider that plays. How confident do you think they are internally, knowing that just mechanically it's something that's fixable based on the fact that it's not a big velocity dip, it's not a big movement profile dip, it's just kind of getting back to what made you so successful a few years back?
Yeah, I think they're confident because the stuff is where it is. And I think there's probably is a mechanical component to it. They kind of touched upon that a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's sort of like Jerry was touching on, it's sort of how you're going at guys. And some of it's executing in 2 strike counts. Like, I'm sure he wasn't trying to go fastball down the middle in those sort of spots, but also going to a fastball in a spot or a predictable spot or a predictable count where like guys are ready for your fastballs. Like, all right, this sort of 2-strike count, he's usually going to try to just blow a fastball by me, or he's going to try to throw a slider in zone as opposed to trying to get a chase and wasting a pitch when he can't. So I think that's something that the Dodgers have kind of stressed with him, but I do think there's also going to be something to just being put into more ideal matchups where you're not just strictly in the ninth inning with everyone geared up for it. You're kind of used against a tough lefty, like sort of how the Padres used him against Shohei Ohtani in that postseason run. So I think there's something to that maybe helping out his numbers as well.
Yeah, that fastball elevating last year. Tanner Scott due for a big bounce back year. Now, speaking of bounce back years, some other bounce back candidates on the position player side. Fabian's got 2 catchers, Will Smith, Don Rushing, 6 infielders, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Max Muncy, Miguel Rojas, Santiago Espinal, Hae-Sung Kim, and we'll start with the infielders. So Santiago Espinal placed on the dropped into the 40-man roster. He's a guy you signed in February when they already reported to camp. This is kind of one of the early storylines on the season. It is a former All-Star that because Tommy Edman and Kike Hernandez are out and injured, he's got some opportunities all around the diamond, not just second base, but third base, shortstop, plays corner outfield spots. It feels like he did everything he needed to do in camp to impress Dave Roberts, the organization. He certainly has earned that spot. And this is a really interesting development early on here, right, Fabian?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things where if you're the Dodgers, it's not often you see an NRI kind of come in, especially on the position player front, and make the roster. And he's done his part. Like, he's kind of forced the Dodgers' hand. He's kind of worked a lot with his bat path, worked a lot on just trying to kind of simplify some things offensively for himself and focus on making more contact. That has worked. I do think that it's kind of a very niche role he's sort of brought in to fill at this point. Like, he is going to be sort of in that Kike Hernandez role until Kike Hernandez is back, sort of being the main right-handed depth behind a Max Muncy, behind a Miguel Rojas, who, like we mentioned before, like one of those veteran guys, 2 veteran guys who have had some injury histories in the past, guys that it makes sense to sort of backstop there. And that's a guy where, like, if he takes off in this kind of limited role in the next couple of months, like, then all of a sudden you're looking at really interesting conversations when Tommy Edman and Kike Hernandez are getting ready to come back. And that's a good problem to have if you're the Dodgers. But also, like, this is a guy who has more than earned his spot, at least to start the season. And we'll see sort of how the rest of it plays out.
Yeah, we know they love the optionality, and you look at third base too. I mean, this could be good for Max Muncy. It pushes him maybe a little bit there. And then also, if every opportunity gets against lefties, if he shows the ability to be productive against lefties in those spots, I mean, Jerry, this is a guy that's extremely versatile. And we know if you're on the Dodgers and you can hit, we know that the defense is already there for him. They're going to, like Fabian said, I mean, the best thing that he can do is make them have to make a tough decision at some point.
Yeah, and that's your job. If you're Santiago, that is your job. You go out there and do your job and play well, play extremely well, and let them figure it out. I credit him. He came to spring training ready to go and just showed how much of a pro he is. And you mentioned earlier he was a former All-Star. This guy knows how to play the game. He's sure-handed. You can put him at first, second, third, or short. We know he's going to give you a good at-bat, and he has some surprising pop, too, as well. So I love the fact that he's a right-handed hitter. A guy we could use, maybe spot start against left-handed pitchers against a tough lefty, give Max Muncy a day off to rest his legs. But I think this is just a good move for the Dodgers, getting a veteran guy that knows how to play and is hungry to win. So when we get Kike Hernandez back, I think he mentioned sometime in late May, we'll get Kike back. I know he said the dates. I think it was May 24th or something like that. And then we get Tommy Edman back. Those guys are vital to our ball club. But this is an opportunity, man, for Santiago to show, hey, I still got a lot left to offer at the big league level, and may do himself a favor. He goes out and balls out. He comes here and stays here, or he gets traded somewhere else, like let's say like a Michael Busch. You know, so you want to extend your career if you're Santiago, and why not do it here with the Dodgers? Either you stay with the Dodgers or go somewhere else. It's a win-win for the Dodgers and Santiago.
Yeah, and then the other real position battle was Hae-Sung Kim, Alex Freeland fighting for that really was last kind of roster spot. But this is a guy who get the lion's share, starts at second base. He can be a backup for Andy Paz in center field. He did go 1 for 12 in the WBC. People were trying to wonder, how much are those at bats and those struggles going to matter? Look at those at bats, not like he was getting fooled a lot or anything like that. But Fabian, it feels like Sung Kim, he is in more the driver's seat at this point to take that spot come opening day.
Yeah, I don't know if either him, like Kim or Freeland, really went out and really went out and won this position battle in a sense. Like Alex Freeland showed some improved approach stuff, but like the numbers were just not good this spring. And Kim, like the swing is still very much in a spot where it's improved, but still a work in progress. It's not necessarily ideal with where the Dodgers would like it. But at the end of the day, I think Kim probably has the edge for some of the reasons you mentioned: the speed, the defense, the fact that he can play some center field. And maybe I think the plan would ideally be for like whoever wins that job to get the majority of starts against right-handed pitching. But I do wonder if Kim doesn't quite fully show it offensively to start, if some of those at bats started to get eaten into by a Rojas or an Espinal a little bit, where maybe it's Kim starting 3 times a week as opposed to 4 or 5. I think that door is definitely open until Tommy Edman's back. But yeah, I think as of right now, it probably goes to Kim just for some of those reasons above.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some pressure on him to perform offensively early based on the fact that after that hot start, he really just didn't have some consistent success at the plate. So, yeah, that's going to be something really early to monitor for this team. Mookie Betts, we know that Andrew Friedman's had said it multiple times. If you're going to bet on someone to have a bounce-back season, it's Mookie Betts. By the way, when you're bounce-backing from a 4-WAR season where you finish top 3 in the Gold Glove, you're still an above-average WRC plus player, I think I would sign up for that. But based on his lofty standards of his career, an MVP, a future Hall of Famer, he has made no mistake about it that he wants to get back to being that hitter that he was. And Fabian, another incredible piece like they all are. I really like that part in there about the bat speed and just pointing out the fact that he's not a hitter that has ever had this tremendous bat speed. The margin for error is a little less for him than it is for guys like Shohei and Freddie. So what did you learn about Mookie when you kind of looked under the hood and wrote that piece?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Mookie Betts going into the season is you have to sort of find yourself somewhere in one of two camps. Usually, are you seeing some of this decline with him because he got sick at the beginning of last season and he really was kind of fighting uphill? Are you willing to believe that was just kind of a one-year aberration? Or is it the start of a trend, especially maybe exacerbated some by the fact that he is moving up the defensive scale? For as good as he's been defensively at shortstop, how much is that maybe taking away from his offense? And how much of a concern is that? I think the Dodgers and Mookie are more willing to lean towards the illness is what sort of caused this. And they sort of point to the bat speed as the main reason why, where the bat speed was ticking down from 23 to 24. And I think Mookie Betts kind of knew that going into last year, really worked to sort of bring his bat speed up, said the bat speed was back to a better place by the end of spring. Then he gets sick. Then the bat speed's, I think, like a mile and a half lower than it had been in 24 at the start of 25. And he worked all season long just to get back to where it was in 24. This spring, he's kind of put more of an emphasis on trying to get it back to where it had been even in 23. There's no public bat speed data for spring training, so we don't really know where it's at. But it does seem like he's in a better spot, at least right now. And it seems like he's being conscious of some of the other things that sort of come with the concerns of being 33, of the extra workload of playing shortstop. And that's why he's been as open and curious as he's been to work with Osamu Yada, a.k.a. Yada Sese, who works with Yoshinobu Yamamoto. All these sort of stuff to try to help add some mobility, add some longevity, sort of recomposing his body in a sense where he's never a guy who's like had really relied on mass or strength, but like using that strength of that mobility and trying to prolong that as long as he can.
Yeah, and you mentioned in your piece that he feels like he's moving faster, that the strength is back. But the real big takeaway for me was the consistency. He told you, when I show up to the park, I don't have to guess. Jerry, as a big leaguer, going through the ebbs and flows of the season, how big is that? Just to know that your floor level is just some consistency, some familiarity, and doesn't have to panic or guess, like you mentioned in Fabian's piece.
Yeah, that is, trust me, I've been there before. I've been standing on the on-deck circle thinking, maybe I should hit left-handed when I walk up to the plate in a big league game. So, yes, the guessing part, you do not want to feel that at all, because you understand you want to maximize yourself, your ability, because you know that guy you're going to be dealing with on the mound has maximized his ability. So I really believe last year, him losing all that weight, I begged for him to take 2 weeks off to regain that weight because shortstop is such a demanding position every day. I knew he'd be playing catch up the whole year, trying to regain his strength and getting his weight. And he never really did. But he did have a solid year. And you mentioned it. Did he have a Mookie Betts type offensive year? No. But he had a good enough season to help this Dodgers team win a World Series. That said, he's had an entire offseason now. He's healthy. He regained his strength. And I love the fact that Yada is in the mix. Anytime Yada's in the mix, I mean, where was he when I was playing? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm seeing him get on Mookie's shoulders, and Mookie's really activating his core. He's flexible. So, again, I'm going to bet on Mookie Betts. He's just too talented of a player, and I think he's going to have a monster season.
Yeah, seeing him with Yada Sensei is awesome. When I first saw that clip, the first thought that crossed my mind was, wait a second. He's playing shortstop. He's going to pitch next. Like, is Mookie ever satisfied? I mean, what does this even mean? But, I mean, people do ask Fabian, like, what exactly does the standing on the shoulders or holding him on the shoulders thing do? I think it's like 130 pounds or something like that. I'm just going to go out there and guess it's just core strength and balance.
That's what I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't like. There's so much like of Osamu Yada's teachings that are like very much. He is very convicted in it, and I don't know if like a lot of guys even ask for like an explanation like what this does for this, but they clearly are listening, and I think guys have been interested and are at least intrigued about it since Yamamoto arrived, and obviously seeing what Yamamoto did last year and last October. A lot of those questions have gotten a little bit louder from some guys who are looking to get some pointers here and there.
I must tell you this. Yamamoto goes out there and pitches, I mean, lights out in the playoffs, World Series, pitches Game 6, lights out. He comes back on 0 days rest and ends the World Series on the mound. I'm going to listen to his trainer. So maybe Yada I do some of those exercises. He makes me a better analyst. Maybe he does that for me. So I'm going to explore. I'm going to hit up Mookie and Yamamoto and say, you know what, let me borrow Yada. Give me a half hour a week. Maybe I can improve my skills.
Imagine getting paid to have people give you piggyback rides. That sounds like the dream job. So he's certainly figured things out in a big way. So we're ending the show on this. So if you watch the first episode, all three of us are wrong. I had Team Japan winning the WBC. Fabian had the Dominican Republic, and we know that Jerry Hairston had the USA, and it was Venezuela that won the WBC. But as everyone's saying, no one lost because baseball won, because you look at the ratings. Fox Sports PR, they tweet out a legendary game calls for a legendary viewership number as 10.7 million viewers watch the World Baseball Classic final on Fox and Fox Deportes, the most watched WBC telecast ever. It had significantly bigger ratings than even the 2023 matchup, Japan versus USA, Shohei versus Trout. And look, I mean, if you are on board with the WBC before this tournament, although it does have its flaws, clearly the interest is growing and it's great for the game, Jerry.
I'm going to say this. It was definitely a win for baseball. It was a win for the players. But you know who also won? I think it was the fans. And here's why. If you go back the last couple of years, and I know the commissioner, Rob Manfred, he sometimes gets knocked here and there. It's cool to knock the commissioner. But really go back, man, and see what he has done and added to this game. The pitch clock, which I wasn't in favor of, has been tremendous for the game. Tremendous for the game. And a couple other things that we thought weren't going to be good have really benefited the game, and benefited the players, and benefited the fans. Baseball, and I grew up in this game, guys. I've been going to big league clubhouses since I could crawl. I breathe, ate, drank baseball since the early 80s, okay? I've been a fan first and became a player, played a long time, and now I'm still in the game as a broadcaster analyst. Right now, this is the best Major League Baseball has ever been since I've been here in 4 decades on this earth, a little over 4 decades, right? This is the best baseball's ever been, especially globally, and it has a chance to really explode even further. I'm going to say this. Do you really think the commissioner who's done so much is going to allow? Now, I really believe there'll still be a lockout, but do you think he's going to allow them to miss games? Do you really believe that? I don't, because now the players have so much information. I told you guys, especially Doug, I told you this, 3 or 4 months ago. The players already have this information. They've had this information, but now they got even more information with what just came out the last couple days with the values of franchises. We had estimated somewhere between 6 to 8% value, which would be incredible. It was just reported it went to 12% as far as how it went up in value, each franchise. And now with the ratings explosion, other entities are going to want to see baseball, have them on their have baseball on the telecast, because the ratings are through the roof, and they're only going to climb because we have so many stars in the game. Shohei Ohtani with the Dodgers, Aaron Judge in New York, Bryce Harper in Philadelphia, Acuna Jr., who just led Venezuela to the WBC championship in Atlanta, Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez in Kansas City. Baseball is in such a great place. I'm telling you, they're not gonna allow it to be no games or miss a couple games because they can't afford to. Baseball, I really believe, is on a rocket ship and is ascending, and it's the best it's ever been.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the interesting takeaways just from narratives of this entire tournament were some people are getting very uncomfortable with players saying that a WBC championship means more to them than a potential World Series. I almost felt uncomfortable tweeting out things like, hey, this is the loudest I've ever heard a baseball game. And I was at the Freddie walk-off and things like that. I mean, it was just so incredibly loud for some of these countries. And it's the agony of the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. It's fans crying, win or lose, right? And like just being around Venezuela and seeing their fans cheer and just play music and chant and do all the things they do. Like there may or may not be a video of me dancing with Venezuelans because they told me if I'm going to film their stuff, I got to get involved in it, right? Like, it was crazy, right? But I want to ask you this, Fabian. Let's be honest here. This tournament could be better if you had fully built up pitchers, if you didn't have to have, as Mark DeRosa talked about, conversations with 30 managers and honoring the Padres by not using Mason Miller in a tie game. Do you think it's something, I mean, Manfred has talked about it. Do you think this is something that the players on their end would want to do as far as shut down the season, the regular season, and play a 2-week WBC during the year in place or in addition to the All-Star game?
I think it'd be difficult logistically because it's still at the same time, like if you're gonna shut down the season, like then are you shutting down guys during that period? Or are they still trying to like throw sim games on the side? Or are you risking injury to those guys who are different, like changing up the routines in the middle of the season? I think we'll maybe get a little bit of a trial run for this with the Olympics if major league players are playing in the Olympics, which is still to be determined. But if they do, then maybe we had a trial run for this. But it's just so difficult to do. And there might not be a better time to do it than spring training, as difficult as it is. And it might honestly just come down to Major League Baseball. If they're running the WBC, say, hey, like impressing on these teams, like, hey, we aren't going to worry as much about the insurance stuff. We're not going to worry as much about the workloads. Like this tournament has to matter. It has to matter to us. It matters to your guys' bottom line. Like it's sort of basically what FIFA did with the World Cup, where basically like there's no team that wants their players playing in the World Cup. Ideally, like you don't want to risk injury, but that's all these players are kind of look for on a 4-year cycle. They are trying to get into that World Cup field, and they're willing to. A lot of these national teams say like forget whatever these teams' restrictions are. They're coming out there and playing, and I think that's ultimately what it might come down to. Is like, hey, Major League Baseball saying this is too important of a product for us now. Like, look at how much TV ratings we're getting. We aren't going to let workloads. We aren't going to let team-led restrictions sort of play a role. We want the best players playing on every single team we possibly.
And I'm gonna continue that answer, which is great, Fabian. You're exactly right. But this is so good again for the players to say, hey, this is another bargaining chip for them, right? Because now that we've seen the WBC absolutely explode, this is something they can use. Hey, we'll play in the Olympics in 2028 because that could be a huge opportunity to see how it looks in the middle of the season. And I'm telling you, if I'm a player, I wasn't that great of a player, so I wasn't going to be representing Team USA. That 2 weeks off would be great. Maybe I have a nagging hamstring injury or something's been bothering me the first half of the season. I take that 2 weeks off a little bit and recoup, my injury and make sure that I'm fully healthy for second half. So I think the players, even if they're not participating in the Olympics or in the future of the WBC in the regular, shutting down the regular season, I think it benefits those players, and because they'll still be able to go work out. You're going to get your workouts, and players know how to get ready. They don't have to go to the stadium. They can go to either the stadium that's not being used in the Olympics or the WBC, or make sure they're ready to go. So I think 2 weeks off, I think they're going to use the Olympics as that testing ground. And if it explodes at the Olympics, you best believe the next WBC would be in midseason. But no matter what, guys, it has been a success. It has been awesome. And I credit the fans, man. The fans have been awesome. And wow, I guess the Dodgers aren't ruining baseball. I guess they're not ruining baseball because we're seeing so many superstars on various teams in various countries play this great game. And I just love the fact that baseball is ascending.
Hey, man, I asked Jimmy Rollins about the WBC, and he's like, are you kidding me? Ain't nobody trying to watch spring training right now. That's boring. You know it, right? And so, like, I think there's that element, too, which I love spring training. I love the roster stuff, of course. But, like, I think just for the casual fan, just to kind of usher them into the season, if there was a perfect world where you get built-up starters, even Paul Skeens said after his start that he wasn't 100%, obviously, right? But what I do know is that this thing has only been around since 2006. I think we've had like 6 WBCs. It does feel like we're at the beginning of something that's potentially special just because of all the momentum that is gained. And it would be a missed opportunity, I think, for Major League Baseball not to fully capitalize on this. But as Fabian points out, it's like everything sounds like a good idea until you get into the logistics. And I think Fabian brought a good point. The pitchers and players that aren't participating in the WBC, like what does that 2-week span look like? But either way, it was incredible. And it was a great night for baseball and a great tournament. And hey, it's a perfect way to kick off the season, which starts a week from today. That's going to do it for episode 2 of the Dodgers Collective. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, give us 5 stars, write us a review, read all of Fabian's work at The Athletic. And Jerry Hairston Jr., you can find him on social media and Sportsnet LA. He's everywhere. So we'll see you guys next week, and go Dodgers.